Can someone just give a thumbs up to make sure the presentation is working if they can see it? Okay, cool. So Kyber Network, basically we are powering decentralized liquidity for decentralized finance. We all know decentralized finance, very up and coming. Decentralized finance, or DeFi, it's a major blockchain and crypto use case, right? A couple years ago, we had ICOs, we had crypto kitties, and there wasn't so much more than that. But in the past year, there's been a huge uptick in decentralized finance, things like trading, payments, lending, tons of stuff, and we're still discovering more, every single day. So now, what is the benefit of having this liquidity, or at least, decentralized liquidity? Benefit of having liquidity in general, you can easily exchange from one asset to another, and you don't want to have, a large change in the market price. So if you didn't have a lot of liquidity, chances are, it's going to affect the market price by a large amount. So DeFi needs decentralized liquidity. It's liquidity that's available on the blockchain. So we want this decentralized liquidity to, have a trustless relationship. We don't want to, be relying on these liquidity providers. We want to make sure that the trust is there, can be validated. And we also want this liquidity to be transparent. We want it to be verifiable. We want the, to see that we have this liquidity. We don't want to just take someone's word for it. And it also should be working seamlessly without breaking, any of the previously mentioned, trust assumptions or any other security holes. So this liquidity can be utilized by decentralized apps or dApps. And we want it to be accessible. With centralized liquidity, it's very hard for these decentralized apps to take advantage of that centralized liquidity in a seamless way. So the problem is with decentralized liquidity in its current, point is that it's scattered, right? We have liquidity on Uniswap, we have it on Kyber, Oasis Bancor, and 20 other places, and it's continuing to grow. So how do you choose the right liquidity source? How do you take advantage of all of these? As a trader, you could, utilize something called a decentralized exchange aggregator. And what that does is it essentially sends a request to every single one of these liquidity providers, and kind of tells you, hey, this guy has the best liquidity, so we're going to use him for this trade. And what Kyber is doing, it's also kind of acting as an aggregator. So Kyber Network, the on-chain liquidity protocol, right? It aggregates the diverse liquidity sources. It makes sure that it's getting the best rate, whether that's from a Kyber reserve or it's from Uniswap or Bancor or any of the others. And as you can see in this kind of little image here, on the left, you've got Uniswap or Kyber reserve or the different other liquidity providers, and in the middle, it's Kyber Network, right? It's aggregating that rate and it's providing that best rate to any of the dApps that it's integrated with. So this, it can make sure that you're getting the best rate across all liquidity providers, not just Kyber. What can be powered? So we've kind of touched on dApps. dApps are utilizing Kyber, but also vendors, wallets for token-to-token swaps. You can have DeFi, the reason we're all here, and just exchanges in general. If they want to increase their liquidity, they could take advantage of Kyber. So use cases, here you'll see the wallet token swaps. On the left, I believe that's Argent, a very popular mobile wallet. On the right, you've got crypto payments for games or e-commerce sites, which it's very valuable what Kyber can provide. So for example, if an e-commerce website, they only want to, they want to accept cryptocurrency, but they don't want to be susceptible to the volatility that often comes with crypto. And that's a very big problem because, if they accept crypto and then, hey, 2 days later, they find out that they, lost 10% of their revenue. No one wants that. So they want to allow users to pay in crypto, but they also kind of, they want the stability. They don't want the volatility. So then they can, set Kyber up and essentially allow them to pay with any token. But in the back end, Kyber automatically swaps it for that stable coin at the best rate. So the user would still be able to pay with their token, and the vendor would still be able to receive their USD amount that they're originally trying to get. Here's another more intricate use case example. It would be an index fund platform. So you'll see in this example, we've got the end user. They have their ETH and they want DAI. They want their WBTC, and they want their link. They want it in different rates. So, they'll send their ETH to the index fund platform, which is integrated with Kyber. Now, Kyber aggregates these all to the different liquidity providers. So Oasis has the best price for DAI, Uniswap for WBTC, Kyber Reserve for Link, whatever. Goes back into Kyber, goes to that index fund platform, and then it can get that user that fragmented amount that they wanted, the 30% DAI, at the best rates. Here are some of the dApps and services that Kyber is integrated with, and it's continuing to grow. So a lot of people, are very, they want to take advantage of the decentralized liquidity. And just some growth stats, over $1 billion in volume we recently hit, over 1 million trades, over 100 integrations. And a big thing here is $8 million in inventory. So right now, all Kyber reserves together, I think I actually just checked before this meetup, it's like 7.5 million. And yet, if you look at our daily volume, we've got, I think today was like $5 to $6 million in daily volume. So, we're able to take advantage of this and provide this, high amount of volume and liquidity with only having, a small amount of money or liquidity under management. So if you look at, like, say, Uniswap, for example, I don't know the exact number, but I think they needed something like 20 times the amount of inventory to provide the same, volume rates that we have. So it's very efficient when you look at Kyber reserves and compared to some of the other providers that are currently on the market. Got over 45 reserves, 80 tokens, and all of this is, of course, growing. Just quick network growth of 2019, one of the most used platforms by unique users. So in a sense, we're getting to people that are kind of just getting their feet wet into crypto. And that's very important as well. So some of the unique attributes, we've already kind of touched on some of these, the fully on-chain aspect where we want this liquidity to be transparent and verifiable, which is all part of being, fully on-chain. Simple integration with dApps. So, you don't need a master's degree to integrate your dApp with Kyber, right? We make this all very simple, and the developers at Kyber were always willing to help. They've got a great developer portal. It's developer.kybernetwork.com. And liquidity aggregation, that's another one. So if you're using Uniswap, you're only going to get liquidity through Uniswap. You're not going to be able to aggregate to find really the best price on the market. And Kyber kind of does that. They aggregate it, as I've mentioned 50 times. As well as the different types of reserves. And so I'm going to touch on the reserves. We've got the automated price reserve. Now this is something that Uniswap uses as an example. Essentially, it's a algorithm that manages this liquidity. So a token team could, for example, they have a lot of their token. They don't really have the the smarts or wits to constantly be managing their funds. They just kind of want to let the natural price discovery, so they can throw it in this automated price reserve and let it go, do its work just like Uniswap would. Now, this isn't the most efficient. It generally requires more liquidity, but then we also provide the Fed price reserve. So the Fed price reserve, I think if Brooke could post a link, we have a blog post we recently released with some more information on that if you're interested. But it's for more, professional market makers. They don't want to just put a whole lot of liquidity into a smart contract and forget about it. They want to actively be managing this liquidity. And the Fed price reserve, it's quite literally feeding the price to the reserve. So what that means is, you could be, if you provide liquidity for a certain pair, you're going to be able to feed the price that you want through a centralized, form. Like you're able to set the price, I guess, in a centralized way. And now, when we tell people that, the first, kind of throws red flags up. They're like, well, isn't this decentralized? Why can you, provide centralized prices? And the thing is, yes, it could be taken advantage of. A reserve could be malicious. they could say, hey, we're going to make ETH $1. So now anyone that tries to sell us ETH, we'll pay you $1 for your ETH. But then it requires a few things. The user, they're going to have to, look at the trade and say, hey, I'm only getting $1 for my ETH. So that right there probably won't happen. But then the big thing is, since we have more than 45 reserves, it's really the best price reserve gets taken advantage of first. So Kyber kind of talks to every single one of these reserves. And if one, Fed price reserve is setting the price for something that's way, incorrect to try and scam people or whatever, take advantage of this one centralized aspect, well, then any other of the reserves would, it would fall back onto those first because they're offering the correct proper price. And if all else fails, for example, if all Fed price reserves were all of a sudden they wanted to act maliciously, it would go down to automated price reserves, which there are still plenty of those because there's no centralized aspect for automated price reserves. And again, it would still require the user to kind of not even look at the price they're getting. So, and real quick, the bridge reserve is what allows us to connect to these different liquidity sources. So as I mentioned, Uniswap, Bancor, all those, that's what the bridge reserve is for. It allows us to pull liquidity through them. And quick little graphic just showing, all these reserves work in the same. So it's not like a user has to query a Fed price reserve specifically. This is all going into Kyber Network's on-chain liquidity. So what's next for Kyber? This is the Katalyst upgrade that I had mentioned. We want to basically empower the members of our ecosystem and the DeFi ecosystem in general, and we want them to, take part in Kyber's future success. We want them to have, a say in what goes on in future developments. So we've got Katalyst. It's the protocol upgrade with a new token model. So what's new? We have important decisions made through the KyberDAO. If you don't know what a DAO is, it's a decentralized autonomous organization. I could, talk for hours. That's for a whole meeting itself. So I would recommend, if you want to learn more about a DAO, do some Googling because there is a lot of information about that. It brings a new staking mechanism for KNC, which is our native token, to Kyber Network. It improves liquidity contribution, which I'll touch on in a little bit here, and then customizable fees for takers and dApps. So in our previous model, we had a baked-in fee of 0.25%, and of that fee, it was like 30% gets sent to those who integrate Kyber. So if you were a dApp and you integrated Kyber into your dApp, you could earn 30% of the fees for any user that uses your dApp and has any value transfer made through your dApp. And this was great, but again, it kind of, by removing this, we're able to, provide a more competitive pricing for our users, but it also allows these dApps to kind of set their own fees. So they can still make money if they want to, or they can, choose to let their customers or users get the most competitive price as well. And it's been great. This is a lot of dApps, they don't really have a revenue stream or anything, so allowing them to do this, it's kind of good to get them off the ground. So governing the liquidity protocol, this is what you'll be using, what you can use the KNC token for. It is our governance token, and it essentially it's a community platform is the KyberDAO. But it basically lets KNC holders, they can vote on future network variables, parameters, different decisions through things we call Kyber improvement proposals. And I think that's separate from general variables like voting on what the fee should be, any fee changes. So more on the KIPs, as we call it, are to be released soon. But a very important part as well is KNC holders, when they vote, so they receive rewards in ETH from network fees, right? Kyber Network, because we're a liquidity protocol, we're powering all this value transfer across the protocol, and we're able to generate fees through doing so. So I use Uniswap as an example a lot because they're very well known, and they have a 0.3% fee After Katalyst, we have a 0.2% fee. So we're still competitive in that sense, but it also allows users to, get a share of these rewards, and we're not doing it through inflation. So a lot of crypto projects or, staking type dApps of the sort, they'll oftentimes, they'll reward the stakers through inflation. So what that might look like if Kyber was doing that, they'd say, hey, we're going to mint more KNC just to provide the stakers. And that's not always a good thing to do because, well, it's inflation, and we don't want that. So we can actually reward our users through the ETH that's generated from the traders, and this is paid by the taker. Previously, the maker had to provide the fee, which, kind of also disincentivized any liquidity providers. They would have to expect to pay a little bit in fees, and that it was a hurdle, wasn't good. So it's through deflation as well. We're not just, we do have some being burnt. I'll explain that in a minute here. I've got like this quick little video. Hopefully the audio plays. If it doesn't play, just thumbs down.
Traded and close to 100 dApp integrations, Kyber is the leading liquidity protocol that connects decentralized liquidity for decentralized finance. The Katalyst protocol upgrade will launch the KyberDAO, a decentralized autonomous organization comprising a community of KNC holders. KyberDAO enables all KNC holders to play an active role in the growth of Kyber Network by voting and deciding on key parameters. By participating in Kyber's governance, KNC holders earn staking rewards in Ether. Here's a simple example. As the DeFi ecosystem grows, more network fees are collected from trades made through Kyber. KyberDAO participants decide on the allocation of network fees that will be burned, given to top-performing reserves, or distributed as staking rewards. Assuming a 10-10-80 ratio, 80% of the network fees will be distributed to stakers in proportion to the amount of KNC staked. More KNC staked means more voting power and rewards if you vote. Hope you now have a taste of how KyberDAO and KNC staking work. Get ready to stake, vote, and get rewarded. Kyber Network, the on-chain liquidity protocol, powering instant token exchange in any decentralized application.
So that was just kind of our teaser video. I don't know if you caught it, but the people who voted in that, there were a couple of people that didn't agree with, what was being voted on. And the thing is, they still get rewarded. So you don't have to be a part of the majority, which would cause a lot of governance problems, just to get, an equal share of rewards. So it doesn't matter how you vote necessarily to still receive that same reward as anyone else would who's staking. Now, Katalyst for makers or liquidity providers, there's been a lot of changes. So we offer rebates. In the example of the video, it was like 10%. I think in our very first run, we're doing 65% is being given to stakers and something like 25% given to liquidity providers. I'm not entirely sure on what the beginning parameters are. But so before, when liquidity providers, they were, they had to pay this fee. Well, now they're actually getting paid to provide liquidity. So in a sense, it's, incentivizing these people to come provide their liquidity on Kyber in a similar way to what Uniswap is doing by giving them a share of, fees generated across the network. And it removes the friction. As I mentioned, they don't need to hold KNC. So before, KNC was just used as a fee by reserves. This is an extra obstacle for these liquidity providers. It's not, not something they want to be doing. They don't want to be having to pay extra money on top of, making markets for Kyber. So that's completely removed. And again, we have the Fed price reserve, and it makes us very good for professional on-chain market makers. So running a little short on time, so I'm gonna quickly go through this. So for takers, the end users or the dApps, people that are using this and not providing liquidity. So the dApps themselves, again, I mentioned this too, they can set their own custom spread if they want to earn a share of the fees. We have reserve routing. So before, it only relied on the one best reserve. So if this one reserve had the best price, well, it was going to use that, one reserve. after Katalyst now, it can kind of use multiple reserves to ensure that overall it's going to have the best price, which still might be a better price than going through one reserve, because up to a certain amount it might increase the slippage the higher you have. So if you kind of split that across different reserves, it can help mitigate that. And focus on your business. It's very easy to integrate liquidity. You don't have to worry about doing anything like that by using Kyber. So let's see. This is just a little overview of Katalyst. We're now bringing Bitcoin to the Ethereum blockchain. So this is another thing, and the people at bloXroute might have a better solution or something that's way better than what I'm about to explain, or I'm not entirely sure. But the current iterations of bringing Bitcoin to Ethereum a lot of times have this trust issue for the most part. So we've got WBTC, which is probably the most trust dependent. It's a centralized custodian, BitGo, and basically they allow users to deposit their Bitcoin into their custody, and they can then mint this wrapped Bitcoin token on Ethereum. And now if a user wants to get real Bitcoin back for their Ethereum wrapped Bitcoin, they can send it back to BitGo. BitGo would burn that tokenized Bitcoin and send them the real Bitcoin. There's over $100 million in wrapped Bitcoin in custody by BitGo, and on the right you'll see all these partners who are working together on WBTC. Then you've got TBTC. I'm not going to go too much into this. I don't know a whole lot about it. They had recently launched, and then it turned out there was a security issue, and they kind of lasted a day or two, and now they're shut back down and working on fixing that. But they were an example of they're trying to kind of take an approach that doesn't rely on the trust like that WBTC has. Same with REN BTC. So REN has its own ecosystem with the REN token and REN VM, which allows users that have their REN tokens to basically stake them, become a dark node, and it's kind of, they're incentivized to make sure that they're not acting maliciously. So if someone were to, say mint Bitcoin that if they were to mint REN Bitcoin, which is the tokenized version, but they really don't have the actual Bitcoin, well, they're staking REN, so they would be, penalized, and they would lose money, and they couldn't get away with it. And then there's also PBTC. I'm just going to skip. I'm running short on time. Kyber Swap. This is a different entity from Kyber Network, but it's probably the most used DApp provided by Kyber Network. Again, I'm going to skip through this real quickly. Basically, it's just a front end to easily access the liquidity on Kyber Network as a trader. So we have all sorts of different things, mobile apps. We have limit orders, so they're non-custodial and they're decentralized. So you could set a limit order without, having to lock up your ETH or whatever token it is. It just sits in your wallet until that price hits. If you have your phone handy, you can download the app, but the pending iOS App Store approval, because we recently moved locations and now we had to reapply, and App Store has been very bad. There's been a lot of stuff going on with them, so it's just pending. Just some general stats. Kyber Swap, 60,000 wallets in the past 6 months, so I'm getting a lot of new users, and it's great. And so Q&A, if anyone has any Q&A, feel free. I think I've got 4 minutes. If not, I'll kind of discuss on the community pool for just a minute or two.
Hey, Hunter, we actually have a question from Uri. He wants to know how the staking is actually being done.
Sure. So you can access it directly on kyber.org, but it's using smart contracts, trustless smart contracts that allows users to deposit the KNC they want to stake. And the thing is, we use epochs that we say epochs. They're really 2-week windows. So what this would look like as an example is, if a user has KNC, they could deposit their KNC into this trustless smart contract. And now they're going to have to wait until the next cycle begins, or the next epoch. And then when that next epoch begins, their KNC that they staked is eligible to be used to vote. So when they vote with that KNC, they're voting on, the parameters, what should the fee be, or proposals, that sort of stuff. Now, the next epoch after that is when they'll be rewarded for the previous epoch. So they can't say, 1 minute before an epoch turns over, they can't just stake their KNC quick, vote, and then 3 minutes later get their reward and run away, right? They have to sit through an entire epoch in full to get that reward. And there's also pools as well. So if anyone, they don't want to every 2 weeks, have to vote or spend the time to vote or even make the transaction to vote, which costs gas, they can delegate to a pool as well, and just collect the rewards without worrying about the gas. So there's a lot more on that as well, just on kyber.org. That's our kind of our voting or staking dashboard.
And I think we had another question I saw somewhere in some chat, didn't we, Brooke?
No, that's it. We just had a few comments saying congratulations.
Okay, cool then. Got 2 minutes then, so just 1 minute real quick. I was planning on talking about this a little bit more, but we're still pending security audits, so I just kind of left it out. But I'll be operating a pool on Kyber, and it's the community pool. So a problem that I've noticed with like a lot of delegated, staking or staking platforms that offer the option to delegate, such as EOS, basically you get these like cartels almost, and it's these pool operators that get this token delegated to them, but then they have no way of actually choosing what's voted on. So this delegation pool could act maliciously. They could vote for something that the user totally disagrees with, and the user really doesn't have a say, and they just kind of have to take it because, well, I don't care, I just want the money, right? But it shouldn't have to be like that. So I'll be operating a Kyber community pool. It's at KyberCP on Twitter. We don't really have a whole lot of info, like I said, security audit pending, but this is going to be a pool that essentially we're focused on the community. We want to get sentiment from the community in all sorts of different circles like Twitter, Discord, Telegram, and work closely with them, take calls, all sorts of stuff, just so we can make sure that we're acting in the way that the community would want to act. So.
Hey, Hunter, we have another question. Is there any possibility of lowering epoch period?
So this is something that's a little out of my scope. I believe, it would be possible, I'm sure. I don't know. I don't think there's anything in the works for that. If there was reason to, maybe it could be discussed. But again, that's kind of on the development level that I'm not too familiar with. So we have the Telegram and chat groups here for Kyber Network. Well, actually didn't include the Telegram, but it's just at Kyber Network for pretty much everything, Twitter. So feel free to hop in their Discord or Telegram and ask questions there if you have any in the future. Otherwise, on the right, you can reach out to me, Twitter, DeFi Dude, and as well as follow the Chicago DeFi to stay up to date with meetups like this, and our Telegram, where we just kind of push the updates there as well. So thank you, everyone. So from here, I will hand it off to the people over at bloXroute.
Thanks, Hunter. That was quite a good presentation. First of all, I'm impressed with the quality of the slides of you guys. So like, you make me feel bad about my slides. I just like, okay, I'm going to talk, it's going to be friendly, low key kind of thing. And we did like, flash, okay, the super well designed one. So you have us one up like on that front, definitely. But that was super interesting. Like I like Kyber for a long time, and it's one of the projects which I like the most in DeFi, but like that was a good overview. So thanks, man. Let me go and share a screen and do all the annoying stuff relating to that. Hold on. Okay. Hold on. Give me a thumb up that you can see my screen. Thank you. Perfect. Well, I actually have zero visualization into how many people are actually watching us and seeing all of that. So I'm very used to be actually speaking with the crowd, and like I like discussion more than I like just presenting. So we'll try to keep it that way. Anybody who has any questions, throw them in the YouTube chat or something. Brooke will bring them up. It's less of me standing and giving the presentation and more fireside chat style kind of thing. So that did not work. So I just want to, the things that we're going to cover here is really, I'm Uri, I'm the CEO and co-founder of bloXroute. What is bloXroute? Why should I care about bloXroute? What is it that we do? We're called bloXroute because we route blocks. It's going to be very clear soon why is that important in DeFi. And then we're talking about how could you leverage bloXroute for DeFi trading? How can you make more money? How can you make better trades? How can you, well, you have all these opportunities with Kyber, but there's actually, we'll talk about this, there are opportunities that traders are missing out on just because how long things take to propagate and where bloXroute comes into that. And lastly, Mason from our dev team, who's here, you can see him there, he's a great guy, will walk us through what it's like to download and run a gateway. We'll talk what a gateway is and really what it's like to, how it takes 5 minutes to connect the operation to bloXroute and benefit from the things I'm going to discuss. Okay, so let's start by diving right into it. Every time I'll press space and it will make this terrible sound of no, that doesn't work, but this works. Let's try to minimize this. Okay, so really, okay, there is no back. We won't be able to go back on any slides, so pay attention. This is like you get it once and once only. So what's bloXroute? Why are we doing this? And why this is so interesting? Hold on, let me get rid of this in a way that isn't so distracting for me. Okay, so we're bloXroute, and really our mission is scaling blockchains. Okay, we started this journey over 2.5 years ago. bloXroute is actually the crown jewel of my PhD dissertation. So I have a PhD in computer networks, specifically unchaining the blockchain network layer. Okay, so I am a networking guy working on blockchains, and what we do is scalability. So DeFi and the stuff that you could do with programmable money are super exciting. Okay, Kyber is just one of the things which are super exciting. Just all the things that you could do in terms of starting with, like, you know, financial activities, but you can take it also to what it means to have micropayments. What do you have? What does it mean? I'm sure everybody are familiar with what's happening right now with China and the idea of having like a centralized bank, like on-chain kind of thing, and how that could play out, not only in China, but in the West. All these things are super, super cool. But not only are they cool, they require a lot of transactions. So if we imagine a decentralized exchange that has, you know, 1,000 traders, and 1,000 is nothing, right? Binance, the largest one, has 4 million traders. So if you have 1,000 traders and each one of them isn't doing full-blown algo trading, right? You do just a tad of, you know, a bit of arbitrage here and there, 1 transaction per second. Well, that tiny decentralized exchange, which is doing so little, require 1,000 transactions per second. If you want all the DeFi stuff, okay, if you're talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of traders, each one of them doing hundreds of transactions per second, you get really, really fast, not only to thousands, but tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of transactions per second. And really, DeFi would swallow any amount of volume of transaction that we can give it. Like, as long as the price is low enough, it will pretty much swallow up any amount you give it. And so blockchains are super exciting, but they can't really deliver on their promise, because Bitcoin is doing 4 transactions per second, Ethereum is doing 9. Now that it's scaled, we increase the capacity. Okay, we're doing 11.5 transactions per second. That's nothing, right? Credit card companies are already doing 6,000, and transactions or new network, new type of transaction actually require, as we discussed, require hundreds of thousands of transactions per second. Which brings me to, yeah, I am incapable of passing slides here, which brings me to bloXroute and what is it that we do. So we built bloXroute. bloXroute is a blockchain distribution network. Okay, we operate at the network layer underneath the blockchains, and we do actually something which is not complicated. It's simple. We allow participants in the blockchain, so nodes, miners, validator, whatever, whoever, any blockchain out there, we allow them to send blocks to one another fast, right? Fast, even if the blocks are big. And this seems to be, okay, fast internet is a good thing. Everybody wants their internet fast, but why do we need this for blockchain to scale? We do this because let's give a 1.5 minute overview of how blockchains work. The way blockchains work is that somebody creates a block of transactions, right? And he sends it to everybody else. So somebody else could add the next block. And the result of this process is a chain of blocks, the blockchain that contain all the transactions that ever happened. But if you try to scale a blockchain, then let's say, not by a lot, let's say by a factor of 100, just 100. Well, now each block contains 100 times more transactions. So it's 100 times bigger. To send it over the internet takes 100 times longer. And so sending it for a block to reach everybody else takes 100 times longer. And why is that important? Because you can't add the next block before you heard of the previous one. So if you try to scale a blockchain by a factor of 100, you make the block 100 times bigger. It propagates 100 times slower. And the time until the next block is added is also increases by a factor of 100. So you kind of like go back to square one. You do 100 times larger blocks, but the time between blocks also increased by a factor of 100. So you're not doing any more TPS. You're not doing more transactions per second. And this is the problem that bloXroute is here to solve. bloXroute is a provably neutral blockchain distribution network. We just keep everybody in sync regarding the transactions. So when you send a transaction, bloXroute makes sure everybody gets all the transaction at the same time, super fast. And what that allows to do is that when somebody mines a block, let's say I am a validator and I created a new block and I want to send it to Hunter, well, I don't have to actually send all the transaction in there. I can tell him, oh, Hunter, here's the block, but it has transaction 5, 37, 105, 117 in there. And Hunter would know what I mean if he knows all the transactions. So by sending everybody all the transaction, we allow to propagate very large blocks without them taking a lot of time. At the high level, this is what we do. This is who bloXroute is. And so we're currently we're already in production. Something like 10 different pools in Ethereum are already using us on mainnet. The vast majority of the hash power is using us. So all the Ethereum blocks out there in the real world propagating are actually being propagated using bloXroute. I think you can go to BDN Explorer and see some stats around it, but in 90% of the cases, will give nodes blocks faster than they would have heard it from the network. So this is who we are, but what does that has to do with DeFi at all, right? Great, okay, scale blockchain, but who cares? Well, it turns out that because we're operating at the network layer and because we send blocks to everybody, hold on, do I have something regarding? No, it's irrelevant. Because we operate at the network layer and we send blocks to everybody fast and we send the transaction, that allows us to offer services to anybody who dabble in DeFi, okay? We allow to increase the chance of your transaction being in the next block. So if you identify an opportunity, and that could be a liquidation opportunity, or you see a trade, you see an arbitrage, you see something and you want to take advantage of it, well, if your attempt doesn't get in the next block, it's probably lost. It means somebody probably would have taken it by the block afterwards. And so when you identify something in DeFi, you actually want to take advantage of it as soon as possible. And I'm going to now talk about why, if you send a transaction fast, it actually increases the chances of it. What are the benefits of seeing transaction earlier, seeing blocks earlier, all these things. I hope this makes sense, but if anybody has any question on that, feel free to ask Brooke or write it in the chat. Brooke will interrupt me and tell me we have questions. Okay, so that was the short version of who we are and what we do. So bloXroute for DeFi. Okay, let's talk about this for a second. I think most people in the DeFi space are not necessarily traders, but definitely more on the financial side of things. And okay, like they know way more than we, way more than me about like the pros and cons of all sorts of liquidation approaches. And you could do this and like really know their, pardon my language, but they know their shit about these kind of things. But turns out that even the real pros, and I'm talking, you know, those running hedge funds and big money who specialize specifically in DeFi, like people, not just, you know, random finance people out there, even people who know DeFi really well and they're professional at what they're doing, a lot of the time they don't understand what the implications of working with the blockchain and therefore lost opportunities and where they can do better. So I want to talk for a bit about the dead zone of DeFi, that there is a time in which you can't make trades. There's a time that there are opportunities out there, and no matter how high gas you'll pay, no matter what you'll do, you can't take advantage of it. And here's the thing. A lot of people know that Ethereum creates a new block on average every 12 seconds. It's supposed to be 15, but in reality, if you actually look at it, it's something like 12.5 seconds. But that doesn't mean there's a block every 12.5 seconds. There is a 10% chance that a block would be mined in the next second, and a 9% chance for it to be mined in the second afterwards, and then 8% and 7% or so. These are rough numbers, but I'm rounding them up. So on average, the next block is mined every 12.5 seconds, but in reality, the next block would be mined really right now, okay? Like either it is being mined and you just don't know it, or a second from now. Now let's think about this for a second. If I am a DeFi trader and I identify an opportunity, well, first of all, it took me time to realize there's an opportunity, right? Maybe a transaction was mined in the block, but it took me, you know, 0.3 or 0.3 seconds or something like it's 300 milliseconds. I'll try to stay at seconds level just because people are more familiar with that. But 0.3 seconds for me just to identify and hear about this transaction or this block. Now my processing maybe is super fast, but it takes me another 0.1 seconds. So we're at 0.4 seconds until I can say, oh, I want to send this transaction. So I send it, and maybe I'm running my own node. Maybe I use Infura or I use Alchemy or something. So I send it to Infura. Well, Infura, until they get it, is 100.1 second. And until it goes through them, 2 nodes around them is another 0.1, we're at 0.6 or something like that. And then that transaction has to propagate and reach the actual pools and miners. If it doesn't reach them, it's not going to be in the next block, right? It has to reach them first. And even, well, it propagated, it reached them. Well, now the miner or the pool takes the new transaction and creates saying, oh, I'm going to start making a different block. So they create what's called a block template. Okay, that takes them another time. Like they continuously do that, but it takes an additional time. Now that they have the template, the pool send it to the miners. The miners aren't sitting at the same place the pool is sitting. They're sitting 150 milliseconds away, or 0.15 seconds. So it takes something like a second between the opportunity being created and until you see it, wanted to make a transaction, send it out there to reach a pool, to reach a miner, etc. That means that if you remember, 10% of the blocks are, or there's a 10% chance that the next block is mined within a second. So in 10% of the cases, there was an opportunity here that you lost. There is a dead zone just before each block of something like a second, in which you can't make good trades, even if the opportunity is there, even if you pay the highest gas fee in the world, all of that. you're just not fast enough. You have to identify faster. You have to send it faster. It has to reach the pools faster if you want to take advantage of it. And this is, again, it doesn't matter how high gas you'll pay. If it didn't reach the miners, it won't be mined. It won't be created. And this is something that if you're a blockchain guy, especially if you're like a networking guy, then it's like, that's my bread and butter. But it's not something that is necessarily obvious for just the average DeFi person. We said, oh, this is decentralized, but doesn't pay close attention to what's happening at the bottom layer. And so this is where bloXroute comes in. Okay, like our mission isn't really DeFi. We like DeFi because DeFi is exciting and we think it's super cool, and it takes us further into one of the, I don't know, top 3, top 4 things that blockchains are excited regarding. But because our mission is at the network layer, all of a sudden we realized that, oh, we could offer these services, we can offer these things. Hold on. We could offer services and we could help DeFi traders to make better trades. So there are a few things that we're offering. There are a few services, and I'll go over them right now before going and kind of like showing how it's actually being done. So if we discuss these dead zones, one of the things that we offer that you could do right now, okay, if you're a DeFi trader out there, you could do right now is to send transaction faster using bloXroute. Because we're connected to let's say, and something like 7 pools representing something like 70% of the hash power, okay, something like that. Because we're connected to that, when you send us a transaction, we get it and we're optimizing that. We're at the network layer, right? So when we receive it on one hand, we're already streaming it to everybody else with the other hand. So we do this as fast as possible. Like this is real time. We optimize the network, the topology. And so instead of having, you're losing out on 10% of the trades or something like that because you can't make your transaction, like you're missing out on these opportunities. Just by sending the transaction faster, transaction reach pools within 100 milliseconds or 0.1 seconds. For those of you who are less familiar with networks, this is, the limitation of speed of light. This is practically how long it takes to take a transaction and send it all over the world. So this is as fast as it gets. That cuts off something like half of the opportunities that you're losing out on. So sending transaction fast is something that you could do right now using bloXroute. Go sign up, send it through us. We're going to talk about the 2 options, how to send through us in a second. Yeah, that's the next slide. I'm afraid to move to the next slide because there's no going back in this setup. Okay, so that's
really quick, Ori, I can interrupt with a question.
Sure.
So we have a question from the chat. Could the BDN help mitigate front-running attacks?
Hold on. For some reason got that. So yes, but hold on, let me set that back up and then I'll answer. Yes, so what is front running, right? Front running is when I make a trade, somebody identifies that trade. Let's say I'm buying, okay, I don't want to give a too specific example, but I'm about to make a trade. He's trying to say, oh, I'll make a slightly worse trade. I'll take advantage of it and then like accept this trade or something like that. Or if you see, somebody big like Pantera or A16T, somebody is doing something, you see a big move and you're like, oh, this is going to spike, this is going to be big. So I'll try to make my transaction get before that. I'll put a higher gas or something like that. Yes, it helps mitigating it by making everybody faster. Okay, a lot of the front running thing is trying to get that faster. If you're making a trade and somebody else is trying to front run you using bloXroute, and I'm jumping ahead to number 4 here for a second, you will get there as fast as possible. So it's possible for somebody else to see your transaction and try to front run you, but you will see anybody else trying to front run you. So it's kind of like it makes it less opaque and more visible. So if he'll try to make something like that, it does help with that. But at a larger sense, it's more about moving to a broadcast primitive. Okay, it's not that you give it to us, we send it, and it's secretive, so other people can't front run you because they haven't seen your transaction. It's actually the opposite. We actually make everything in the open. So it mitigates the risk of somebody else just trying to send a transaction that will beat yours. Maybe he's way more connected to the pools than your transaction is. And so he'll try to get there and you'll miss out on that. It doesn't eliminate it though, right? You can always, when everything is in the open, then you can always, you know, if I see a transaction somebody else is doing and I try to offer something else with a higher gas, I can always try and send that transaction, but it mitigates this problem, right? It makes it, and by one, making sure your transaction will get to the pool. He won't be able to front run you in the physical sense. He won't be able to reach the pools before you reach them. And so that's number one. And the number two is that it makes all these attempts very, very clear. So even if somebody is trying to front run your transaction, at least you'll be able to see that. And then it's less of a front running thing, it's more of an auction thing. So you'll put like 100 G-Way and he'll put 101 G-Way and you'll put 103 G-Way. Okay, so maybe it makes it more of an auction, but at least it removes the opaqueness of what's happening. Whoever asked that question, feel free. If that isn't suffice, then feel free to follow up. I hope it's enough for Brooke, though. I'm trying to keep her happy. Okay, so this is weird. Okay, now I can see you guys. So that was one thing that we do. We send transaction faster, it reaches everybody else, and therefore it's kind of like it minimizes the dead zone. Another thing is that again, you can do right now is that you can hear about blocks faster. And I'm actually talking about a lot faster. We actually did some measurements with one of the big providers. I don't want to name names here. And we saw that if you run a node and we tell you about blocks and you compare that into, oh, I'll just ask, service X, we tell you about blocks a second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds sometimes before you can hear it from this service provider, let's say it, or service X. Okay, now 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. 3 seconds means that 25% of the cases, the next block was already mined before you even saw there was a block and there was an opportunity here. So if you're basing your entire trading operation on the fact that you can see what are the what are the DeFi opportunities, what are the arbitrage, which trades you could make there, you're missing out on seeing them. You're seeing them in delay. So if you're basing your operation on services like that, you're at a great disadvantage. Even if you run your own node, which is generally better, we see significantly faster. You'll get blocks significantly faster. Okay, we're talking about an average of 100, 120 milliseconds versus, again, something like half a second to a second. You know what? Sometimes even more than that. So if item number 2, send transaction faster, is about getting to them fast, item number 3 is about, well, your entire operation depends on you being able to see what's happening and which blocks actually took place, and seeing them faster. Not only, so I think the obvious thing about it is, oh yeah, I see it faster, then I can take advantage of it and I can make things. But I want to emphasize that if you see it 3 seconds later, that means that you have no ability to participate in 25% of the opportunities. You just don't see that in time. You can't, it's as if you're playing only 3/4 of an entire game. So you're playing, oh, I come to play a basketball game, and you're in there 3 of the quarters, but one, you're not even there. So that's like item number 2. And you can get this right now using bloXroute. Item number 4, transaction stream. Okay, this is something that we're just releasing right now. The transaction stream, I think the first client literally got it today. Okay, so this is like fresh out of the oven. You guys are probably the first people to hear about the ability to do that. If we talk that hearing the blocks faster allows you to make better trades, if you're a very sophisticated trader and you're like, this is your business, this is what you do, a lot of the times you won't wait just to see the blocks coming in. You want to see what transactions are happening, right? Blocks are what is kind of like a stamp in retrospect, right? People send transactions and then after a while a block came and it got into the blockchain. But it's kind of like driving a car and looking backwards. You always see like the things as they happen to an extent, but you don't see forward. However, a lot of the traders that we're speaking with, and we're speaking with top tier, best of the line people in the trade. Of course, they're following what's happening in the transactions. They see who made which trade, what's happening, because these are where the opportunities are coming from. If you think like the most obvious example is that if you have an Oracle transaction that says, oh, the price of DAI, okay, ETH price is now, 230 DAI or something like that. You will see this in the transactions as they come way before it gets in the block, and you could make trades based on that. So not only do we propagate blocks faster, so you can see, we created a new service, the transaction stream, in which we in real time give everybody broadcast all the transactions as fast as possible. Okay, so as transactions happen, we will send it to you. You don't really need it, or you might think you don't really need it if you run a node, right? Because, oh, I'm hearing transactions. Yes, you're hearing transactions slower, okay? You'll see that transaction slower, you'll act more slowly. That means that you might not make it in time to the next block. So the transaction stream is a new feature that we just added. In order to get blocks, it's geared towards people who run their own node. However, transaction stream, you don't even need a node, okay? We created our cloud API where we can just send you the transaction and you can make your decisions based on that. So these are the things which are really, number 4 really came out of the oven today. Everything else that we've been working for a while now. I hope that makes sense for everybody. I'm such more people, I like to talk with people and see the reaction kind of like that. So if you guys are listening right now, you're like, I have no idea what this person is saying. Like, it hurts. That's not nice, but I get it. Feel free to keep comments, ask questions, more than happy to respond. Number 5 is, what about querying future blocks? Okay, so we're sending blocks and we're sending transactions. And then it hit us that, well, if we know all the transactions, we can kind of guess or predict which transactions are going to be mined in the next block. And this isn't sure, right? This is like our assessment, and it changes over time as more transactions are happening. But this is something that we've heard from people. This is super useful. This allows you to know what's going to be the state and what's going to be like, prices or whatnot in the next block. So you could make, not only do you see the transaction and make action based on individual transaction. Oh, this guy did this. Oh, this transaction did that. You're like, oh, I can now understand what's going to be the state in the next block. And this is like constantly updating. We'll send you, oh, here are you could query this as we do it, and the answer might change. And you know what? I'll be very frank about it. It might not be correct, right? It might end up that the final, like a new block is mined. And there isn't a 100% match in transaction, because this is something happening live. But this is something we got super strong feedback from traders that they're interested in that. So that's another thing. It's not ready yet, but if this is something that's interesting for you, reach out to us. We're more than open for feedback and suggestions and thoughts, and get your feedback on some of these features. So that's for number 5. Number 6, hold on for a second. Brooke, I have zero knowledge. How are we on the timing? Are we good? Am I way too long? Am I way too short? Brooke?
Hi, sorry. Yes, we're doing,
Are we?
sorry,
Are
had
we
to
good?
unmute myself. Yeah, we're doing good. We're just gonna start with the gateway installation walkthrough at 6:30, so we're golden.
Okay, sure, cool. Okay, so I think we're actually going to start slightly sooner, but I want to make sure we're at least slightly on, like, around the time, or generally around the time. Okay, so that was future blocks. Another thing which is useful for DeFi, not only, you know, most of this was geared towards traders, but what about, you know, you're making a transaction, you're an ETH user and you're a DeFi user, and a lot of the time you'll make a transaction, whether it's internally, whether it's with somebody else, you're trying to make a transaction. And a lot of the times you're like, oh, well, I'll ask ETH gas station, I'll ask what's the recommended gas price. I'll send that transaction out there. And at that point, there's nothing to be done, right? Just like a Hail Mary, I'll just wait here. Zero knowledge whether my transaction is going to be in the next block or not. What are the chances? What do we think about that? Like, and it's like, well, I'll send it. And I don't know about people listening to us. A lot of the times when I'll make a transaction, I'll pay a higher fee than I actually need it. I'm sending a transaction. It's not urgent. I need it, like, you know, I send it to somebody. He needs it tomorrow. He doesn't even need it today or in an hour. But I don't want to, you know, sit and continue to check. Did he get it? Did he not get it? So I'll pay a higher fee just so I know it's out of the way and I don't have to track it. So instead of that, again, we're working at the network layer, and we see all the transactions, we see all the blocks. So we give
In the chat, just because I think the issues are persisting.
Sure.
Okay. Great answer, though.
Thank you. I worked at home. I was like making it great. This is where Hunter does his magic.
Yes. I mean, really, you would think with a networking expert on the live,
I expect like the internet packets to be intimidated by me and my presence, and to just go directly where it's supposed. But yeah, it's all about that, really.
So I think it was a Zoom issue. We were still streaming on YouTube, but for some reason it didn't say we were. And so I restarted it, and now it says we're live on YouTube on Zoom. So the problem is it gave me a new link. So I can put that in the old chat.
Okay.
But
okay, so are we
good
oh, great. Your magic is very powerful, Hunter. By the way, I just have to comment, Brooke, regarding, like, one time I had a conversation with an networking expert from MIT, the best networking lab in the world. Okay, these guys are doing, like, I'm an expert in it. These guys blow everybody else out of the water. They are the best in specific Wi-Fi, okay, and super cool stuff. And he tells me, yes, like, this is like, he just finished his PhD. He was looking for, like, academic position. He still can't make his home Wi-Fi work. Okay, so he's kind of, yeah, no, that's unsolvable. So if really best people in the world can make their home Wi-Fi work, it makes me feel just a tad better about me, you know, experiencing networking issues.
Yeah.
Okay, are we good to go? Are we good to go with the questions again? So you asked about the price. Were there any additional questions?
That was it for now.
Okay, so we can move forward. So these were kind of like how you could make better trades using bloXroute. Some of it is about, well, you identify the trade you want to make. You want to send it out as fast as possible, because getting it to the pools, like, if it's not there, it's not getting, doesn't matter your gas price, etc. And a lot of it is about seeing the information faster and identifying these opportunities faster, because otherwise, well, by the time you identify them, they're already gone. So how do you use bloXroute? Hold on. Well, you actually have two ways. How do you connect to bloXroute? How do you connect to the BDN? And one of them is if you connect to your node. Okay, and Mason here is going to show exactly how it is. Literally 5 minutes worth. Okay, this is like, oh, there's a setup to be done. No, this is like the easiest thing in the world. So if your operation is one where you're like, okay, I have my own node and I send transaction to it and that connects me to the rest of the network. Well, you should take a blockchain gateway as a small piece of open source code that you run next to your node. You add it as a peer, okay? So your node thinks it's an Ethereum node, but in reality, it sends and receives fast everything through the BDN. So your node will be just up to speed using that. You can query the gateway, you can query your node depending on the specific functionality. If you don't run your own node, no problem, right? It's kind of like, okay, you're using Infura, you're using Alchemy or something like that. We have our cloud API. And again, first customer got it today. So you guys are, if you come and try to use it, you're really front of the line of the people who see like this opportunity. Well, the cloud API just allows you to see all the transactions, to get all that, to get transactions from all these things without actually going through the hassle of running your own node, if that's how your setup is, how your operation is set up. And with that, I think we can go to Mason and what it's like to run a gateway.
Hi, everybody. Can I get a thumbs up if my audio is good? Okay,
Perfect.
great. Awesome. I will share my screen and show you guys just how easy it is to install a bloXroute gateway. So if my screen is visible to you guys, which I think it is, basically what we're going to do is I'm going to take a server, two servers in Singapore, one which has a blockchain node running on it, an ETH mainnet blockchain node, and then a second one, which is just a normal server, and I'm going to launch a gateway on that server. So the first thing I'm going to do is SSH into that server, and then also SSH into our node. And this could vary depending on your exact setup. I'm using AWS servers in this case. And as you can see on the top here, this is the gateway. This is the server that's going to host the gateway. And this one has the Ethereum client running as a Docker container. You can see it right here. And so up here, I'm going to create a new directory called demo. And I'm going to go inside that directory. And now I'm going to create a Python virtual environment to host the Python that will be running our gateway, because we're using something called pip, which is a package installer for any Python package, really. So I'm going to start a virtual environment, virtual env, with Python 3.8, the newest and best Python. And now I will activate this virtual environment. And you can see on the left here, we have our environment. So to install the bloXroute gateway, you first need two things, and they're just simple pip packages that you can install. One is requests, and the other is distro, to help us know what operating system you're running. And so once I've installed these, now all we simply need to do is pip install bloXroute-gateway. And anyone who's used Python has done pip installs thousands of times. They're very simple. And as you can see, the gateway is getting downloaded right now. And so while that's happening, let's go down here to the bottom and just look at the ETH node that we're going to connect to. So this is the IP right here. And if I do ethrpc admin.nodeinfo, a common way to check the information of your Ethereum client, we have the enode, which is the public key of the ETH client, and what port it's listening at, its IP, some useful information. So we're going to use that information when we start up our gateway. And so the gateway startup command is going to look something like this. We're going to prepend no hup, which basically means after I leave this session that I'm showing you guys, don't stop the program that I'm about to run. And then the command is called bloXroute gateway. And this command takes a few startup arguments, and that the gateway will use to connect to the right blockchain node. And so the first startup argument is the protocol, and we're going to choose Ethereum. And we specify it like this, -- blockchain - protocol Ethereum. The second is where our blockchain node is located. And that's the IP address from before. Blockchain IP 54.254. This is also in Singapore, as I mentioned. And then lastly, we'll have our node public key, which is in the enode I mentioned right here. And this will tell us exactly kind of what the Ethereum client needs to know in order to accept our connection.
Mason, can I hold you for a second?
Sure.
So just for like taking into account that most people here aren't super like savvy in tech, even if they run their own node, and some people are maybe more savvy than me. But I just want to point out, okay, you have two machines here, right? You have the one running the gateway, and that's the top one, and you have the lower one where you run your node. So in the if currently you're running an Ethereum node, that like you only have now to do the top one. You have to only add one, and it just, yeah, always a command. They're like looking terrifying, and you have to like you kind of like walk through the step and like do exactly that way, and then you don't mess it up. But really what we're doing here, just like from a high level, is like, oh, well, you do a few things. You run this command and it downloads the software, and then you do this command and it runs the gateway, and you tell the gateway, oh, here is a blockchain protocol. It's Ethereum, and this is the IP address of the node that I wanted connected. And here's the key and whatnot kind of thing. So really you're walking through the steps, and I want everybody, it might look a bit intimidating. We're just like hop directly to how you do it. This is super 5 minutes work, like super easy 5 minutes work thing where you just download the code, run it, tell it to which Ethereum node to connect, and then you're done. So I just wanted to emphasize that for the watcher, for the viewers who aren't super tech savvy, and that might be slightly intimidating. Like if we jump directly, oh, we just do these kind of things. Okay, hold on, I'm not doing any of it. So I just want to point that out.
Right, that's a great point. And what's really going on here is that the bloXroute gateway is protocol agnostic, like we mentioned. And so we're just giving it the bare bones information necessary for it to know where to look and where to point to and how to communicate with the blockchain node. And so this is all we really need. This is all the information that we need to give it. And just lastly, it's going to produce some logs that are constantly describing the state of the gateway. And so we're just going to send those to a file called logs.txt. Why not? And then lastly, we'll add a ampersand just to make it run in the background. So when we leave, it'll still run. And now, if we did it right, we have our gateway. And I can show you guys, 1 second here.
All right, I'm going to interrupt with a couple of questions. So is it right that a user has the option to host their own node, but if they don't want to, they can use the bloXroute Cloud API? That's a question for Uri.
So there are 3 options that we can do. One, or that's possible for a user. One is you can run your own gateway, right? What we're doing right now, to run it on your own machine or in AWS or however you want to do it. This would keep your node in sync and you could query it. That's option number 1. Option number 2, which was mentioned in the question, is, oh, you could use the Cloud API. The Cloud API like allows you, to see the blocks, to see the transaction stream, etc., or to see the transactions. It's not built in right now to send the blocks. So mostly because what will you do with them, right? You'll need an Ethereum node to do all of that. So you could either run a gateway if you're running a node, or just ask the Cloud API. But there is a third possibility here, which is a hosted gateway, which means we'll run your gateway. Okay, this is like, we're in crypto, so everything regarding trust is slightly, at least I'm looking with, a suspicious eye. But the idea here is that we're a software company, right? We're a networking company, and we built like this entire thing. We provide all sorts of services. One of them is that if you don't want to do all of that, we'll run the gateway, we'll maintain it for you, we'll upgrade it anytime we create a new version, etc. So yes, you could do the 2 things. You could run your own gateway, or you could just access the Cloud API. But there is also a third option if you run your node and you want us to run the gateway for you.
Right, exactly. And
sorry to interrupt. again, Mason.
No worries.
I just really don't want you to talk. No, I'm just kidding. But if anyone is interested in the bloXroute Cloud API, they can sign up for the waitlist, and we will email them when it's released and with more information. That waitlist can be found at bloxroute.com/product, and I'll put that in the chat as a link.
Yep.
Okay, you can.
I want to stop Mason from talking too. So I want to emphasize that we're doing that, and you could just join that and use a product and whatnot. But if you have interesting feedback, if you want to be in touch with us, we have the Discord. Brooke will throw that as well. And kind of if you have further questions or thoughts and say, oh, you know what, I would also like this feature and that feature, or just staying in touch, because so we'll tell you, oh, you know what, here's a new service that we're offering. You can now, if the future blocks comes out and you want to do that and these kind of things. So yes, you can just download it to do these things, etc. But I highly encourage you to join the Discord. It's actually zero spam there. You have a few like top traders, DeFi people who ask us questions and respond there. But I really highly recommend it, because maybe we can offer. Just want to point that out. And now Mason can talk again.
Cool. Thanks, Ari. So yeah, while you guys were talking, just kind of redid the installation. And just to show you how quickly it's possible, I just did it twice. And if we look at the logs, we can see here we have a logs file. And we can see that the gateway started and it connected to a remote blockchain node, our relays, other gateways, relays that forward blocks, and then it even started forwarding blocks to our blockchain node. And so lastly, I'll just show that there's a way to check the status of this gateway by going to a bloXroute folder, which is automatically created when you start the gateway with pip. And you can check out, if I just look at the top bit of this file, you can get interesting information. So the gateway is online. There's no account associated with it yet. So there's a free quota, and all these connections are established and looking good, as well as this basic information as well. So that's it. That's all it is to take. That's all it takes to start up a gateway with pip.
Mason, do you want to show the BDN Explorer for a second, just so people can see a bit like what the statistics look like?
Sure. I'll have to stop sharing for a second. And then Explorer.
Are you hiding all the like not to be seen by public eye content that you have on your desktop, and kind of, oh no, I wasn't planning on that. Let me turn off my screen sharing.
Yeah, well, I always screen share this specific window when I was screen sharing my terminal. But now you've got Safari, and can you guys see this? Is this working? Cool. And so here's the BDN Explorer, and just quickly, I won't go into too much detail, but here is a synopsis of the BDN efficiency in the last 24 hours. So what percentage of blocks come from the BDN first, and what percentage of transactions come from the BDN first? And this is really cool information to kind of gauge the health of the network and the speed at which transactions are being propagated and the value add that bloXroute brings. So yeah, that's about it. Anyone have any questions?
That looks perfect to me. I need new AirPods. Mine died in the middle. I hope everybody can hear me fine. I just want to point out a few things. So like Mason right now is at BDN Explorer. Just Google BDN Explorer and you'll find it. The 91% that you see there, that means that if you take all the gateways or all the nodes connected to us, in 91% of the cases, they get blocks faster from us than from the rest of the network. Now, this is like, it can never be 100% because we get the block from somebody every single time, okay? So the 91% here figure is really, really high. Seeing 68%, that means that if you're connecting two blocks, or you'll be seeing 2/3 of the transaction you'll be seeing faster on average or something like that. So this is like worth taking a look at. I think it's kind of cool. Brooke, any other questions out there?
We had one more question, if there was a benefit to running a node.
So it's a good question. Depending on your setup, yes, depending on your, but not always. So depending what you do and what are the things that you follow. Sending transaction fast is something you get equally well if you run a node and run a gateway or just send it to the cloud API, same, it doesn't matter. But if you're querying the state of the blockchain and you don't run a node, it means you're using one of the services, right? The Infura, the Alchemy, whichever nodes, somebody gives you this data. And I can tell you for certainty that data is very, very, very stale. Like seconds stale is not unusual at all. So we speaking with the friendly traders who we work with and get their feedback, etc. It came from them that, oh no, they run their own gateway, run their own node, and therefore they want the gateway because just using that means they're seeing stale data, and therefore there is definitely value. We're considering and exploring just working with such providers and maybe create like this real-time DeFi tier powered by bloXroute, but we're not there yet. We're thinking about it, we're talking about it, but it isn't there. So for the time being, yes, there is definitely value in running your node and a gateway. Again, assuming you do these kind of things. If you don't, I don't know, maybe you're not pretty much at any setup that I can think of, but I don't, depending on what's the input based on which you're making your decisions. And that's, I hope this answers the question.
And I'll just add that with the new products we're releasing with the cloud API, if you can get transactions just as quickly from those as you could from running your own node, that becomes obsolete. And part of the reason that we're bringing this service out is that it will increase access to really fast transactions without having to go through the hassle of running a node.
Good point.
Another question about the BDN Explorer. Are the transactions in the recent blocks shown on the Explorer all being routed through the BDN?
So I'll be even more than that. Everything in Ethereum is being sent over bloXroute. Why? Because we're connected to dozens of pools and services, and we see all the transaction and all the blocks, everything happening. And so we see something, we broadcast it, whether we were the first to see it and whether it's a miner who mined a new block and gave us directly, or we're not connected to him and it was sent through somebody else, but when we'll see it was. So all the transactions and all the blocks are being propagated over bloXroute right now. And if you connect to it, you'll get it faster. Now, I lost track of what was I lost my train of thought. So the question was about whether these transactions are being propagated over blockchain. Yeah, they are, but more than that, everything is being broadcasted and propagated using bloXroute.
Cool. That's it for the questions. We have about 22 minutes left. If you guys want to wrap up a little early, or if there's anything else you want to cover before we...
I think... Generally, I think we had quite a lot of data, both from us and from Hunter. So I don't we can cut it slightly shorter. That's my perspective a bit, and kind of keep it sweet and short rather than just make it longer for no good reason. Hunter, do you want to add anything from your end, whether on this, whether on DeFi in general, whether on Kyber?
Not necessarily. I've got no problem ending a little short here. We can definitely get a recording up, so anyone that wants to watch it later can do so. But if really all I would have to say is keep up to date with the Chicago DeFi stuff on Twitter, so you can follow our future meetups, or reach out to me or the people at bloXroute for any questions for anything that you've seen throughout this meeting. And I appreciate everyone once again for attending, and everyone at bloXroute, thank you. It was great presentation, and so thank you.
But our slides are nowhere as neat and for, like we didn't take the time like you did with like really making the best slides. So this was fun. Thank you for like doing it with us.
Yeah, thanks, Hunter, for organizing.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
We'll wrap it up there then.
Okay, great. And if anyone wants to learn more about bloXroute, you can go to www.bloxroute.com or follow us on Twitter at bloXroute Labs. And we have a Discord, a Telegram, Reddit, all of that good stuff. And links to all of that are on our website.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.